The best game settings in F1 22. In this video, I will show you the wheel settings, HUD settings, camera settings, audio settings, and graphic settings that are gonna make you the quickest out on track. Here we go. Now let's start off with the wheel settings. As you can see, we have the calibration, vibration and force feedback, and the control scheme. With the control scheme being the buttons that you can map on your particular wheel. Now on my wheel, I have the overtake button, for example, put the right hand side of my wheel, but you can change that for yourself, judging of how you like it. Calibration is where you change, well, how I say it, the calibration, if your wheel doesn't do exactly what you want. For example, what often happens is where people have the brakes basically braking without them braking or touching the brakes itself. If that happens, then you put up the brake dead zone, and then the brakes will only start braking until you press the brake pedals a little bit more. Now, next one is going to be the vibration and force feedback, where you can actually change all of the settings of your wheel. So for example, the force feedback, I actually have these settings here, but in the wheel itself, I have a little bit of different settings, and I'll show them on the screen right now. The Fanatec settings, I am running a little bit less drift to make the wheel a little bit stiffer, and it's 320 degrees, meaning the wheel rotation, as you can see on the camera right now, if you completely go to the left or to the right, it actually only goes 320 degrees and not 360. 360 is the standard for Formula 1 cars. So for any beginner who is getting into the game, I recommend you to get 360, but 320 gives you a little bit more responsiveness. So for those of you who want that little bit more responsiveness at the cost of being more precise, or less precise of course, then you can get it on 320. I do not recommend going a lot lower than 320 because then you're gonna become a lot less precise. Now this setting right here, the understeer enhance, I recommend putting it on off, because when you have it enabled, when you go and turn in and you get understeer, it gives you a very weird feeling of basically losing the grip, and you basically lose the force feedback in your wheel as well, and it's very off-putting, so I would recommend to not put that on. And of course for the supercars, I would recommend putting it on 900 degrees of rotation, because those cars actually have round wheels and they have more rotation in general as well. Now that we're done with the wheel settings, let's head on to the graphic settings then. As you can see, the gamma adjustment, motion blur strength, with the gamma adjustment being basically the coloring. If you want to make it more saturated and stuff, I would just say keep it at 100 if it doesn't look very weird. Now the motion blur strength is something I recommend you turn all the way down if you're having struggles with performance, but I mean, if you do want a little bit of motion blur, I recommend putting it on 10 to not be over the top. But let's head down to the advanced setup then, where you can change all the graphic settings. You can't change this on console, but you can change this on PC. So for those who are on PC, play close attention. Now of course, if you have a good PC, you can turn it all the way up, but if you want performance over quality, then these are the best settings that are still gonna go and give you a decent quality here. Then of course you're gonna put ray tracing off, and two of the settings that I recommend you do not put down too much, because you'll actually see the difference, is the texture streaming over here and the lighting quality. If you keep those on medium or whatever, then you are not gonna see a big impact. Now you also have the particles, which I recommend turning off. You won't be able to see them spraying champagne anymore, but it also gets rid of the annoying water that sprays in your vision basically, and actually distracts you from taking the right cornering. So I recommend putting it off, but you'll no longer have the champagne when you're spraying on the podium. Now these are the settings that I recommend you use if you want to have a balance between performance and quality, but of course if you have a good PC, you can use any setting you desire. Now let's head on to the video mode, where there's a couple of settings that are going to be able to go and impact your game performance. Now always try to run it on full screen mode or full screen borderless, as it's going to give you that little extra boost in performance over windowed mode. The aspect ratio, you can put it on your aspect ratio of your monitor, and then the VSync, you always want to try and put that off. As long as the game is not stuttering with it off, just put it off, otherwise you're going to have a little bit of a delay, and you do not want to have a delay in sim racing, because you want to hit those corners, right? Then the refresh rate, you want to put in your monitor's refresh rate. Now mine goes up to 143, and I have a limit on 143 as well, because I don't need more, because I can't see more. And due to this, I am able to save some resources, for example, for other things like streaming that I do on the side. Then you can actually try and change the anti-aliasing mode as well, which I have put it on TAA and Fidelity FX sharpening, which makes the game even more crisp. However, if you want a little bit more performance, you can put it, for example, on NVIDIA DLSS or on the AMD counterpart. Now remember, these settings are only on PC at the moment. Now next up, we have the on-screen display, where you can change a lot of settings that you're going to be able to see while racing. Now the OSD customization is grayed out right now, but when you're in-game, when you're in a race or whatever, you can click it and you can actually move the different particles around. For example, the standings on the right hand side or the left hand side and stuff like that, to customize it to your own liking. Now, a couple other settings that are in here are, for example, miles per hour, kilometers an hour, the track map, the degrees, but the most important thing here is the track map. So you always want to put it on full track map, and this allows you to actually see where everyone is on the map at all times, and not just in a section close to you. So you can see where everyone is, you can see other drivers pitting, and it's going to give you a strategic advantage as well. Now the delta time is going to be very important to see how much you're improving on each lap, but some people prefer to not have it on, as it could distract you with the red and green, meaning, of course, you being slower or being quicker. That could distract you. The proximity arrows I always recommend turning on, because then you can see if someone is overtaking you and where they are exactly, if they're in your blind spot. As you can see in the background right now, you can see somebody's coming, you can see them coming as well with that little proximity arrow, and yeah, basically when they're not in your sight, you still know where they are. Now, there's also a virtual rear view mirror, and you can turn that on as well. However, I personally do not really like it, as it's a very, very big part of your screen. But if you want to, at all times, be able to see someone or whoever is behind, you can put that on, and you'll be able to see whoever is behind. I personally think it's a little bit distracting, so I turn it off, but you can turn it on yourself. Then this one is a necessity. You have to turn on the permanent session timer in practice and quali, because then at all times you will be able to see the timer on the top right on how long there's left in a session in practice and qualifying. And normally that would only turn up, I think, the last 5 minutes or so. And this time around, if you have this on, if you have this enabled, you'll be able to see the timer at all times. Next up, we have the audio settings. And of course, I can't tell you what audio settings to use, because every audio mix is different. But I can give you a couple of tips. So starting off with the onboard mix. So starting off with the engineer ducking, you can actually go and change how much the other audio is going to go down when your engineer is talking. Now, I really like it when it's light, so that you can still hear the other audio, but you can hear your engineer just a tiny bit better over the sounds in the background, over the engine. But you can also put it very, very high, and then all of the other sounds are going to be a lot lower when your engineer is talking. The audio simulation quality, I recommend once you start hearing freezes or audio stutters, you want to put that down a little bit. Normally on high it should be okay. Then of course this year we have a new feature, and you can actually use different commentators. Now in F1 22 there's Alex Jakes, as well as there's actually Crofty.
A beautiful performance from McLaren today.
Tell me, Ant, how did they manage to achieve this win?
Now for this one, the push to talk as well as the mute by default and voice chat ducking, I recommend always to go and put this on mute by default as well as push to talk, because then when you get into an online lobby, you don't hear everybody talking and screaming into your ears when you crash them out. But if you like that, you can turn it off, and then you'll hear everyone as well. A new feature is voice chat ducking, so when somebody is talking, you'll actually be able to hear them a little bit better, similar to the engineer ducking. Now there's actually audio assist as well. You can use the upshift tone, which you'll hear in the background right now. So when you turn this on, when you're driving and you are revving the engine, the game will actually tell you by a beep when you have to go and upshift as well. So for beginners who are learning how to go and shift with manual gears, this is actually quite helpful. Then you have the formation lap parking sensor. When you're using the manual formation lap, when you're doing the formation lap and getting into the grid slot yourself, you actually have an audio setting as well, where they will give you beeps. Just like with modern day cars, when you're parking, you hear when you have to stop for your grid slot. Now there's the new EA music playlist, which is actually pretty cool. And if you want, you can actually turn on the music spatialization, and then you'll be able to hear the music around the track. So when you're driving, you can hear in the background on the speakers around the track, you can hear the music playing as well. If you want that, you turn this one on. I actually thought it was pretty cool. So next up, we have the camera settings, and we're looking at the TV camera right now, which a lot of people actually use. In general, what you want to do is you want to have the field of view be as low as possible, be as close to the car as possible, which will actually give you a little bit more time, believe it or not, a little bit more time to react to what's happening on the track. For example, when you're actually zoomed out, you can see so much more happening, and it actually makes you a little bit slower in reacting to what's happening out on track. So I currently have it on -10, but you can do even more. I personally prefer -10 here. Now going to the cockpit cam. These are my cockpit cam settings. Now with every single camera settings, I always recommend turn off the camera shake, turn off the camera movement, because that will allow you to focus on what's happening on the track instead of the camera moving around, which can set you off just a tiny bit. You do not want that to happen. So this could actually gain you some time. Now next up, let's go to the cockpit cam then, as this is my cockpit cams. These are my cockpit cam settings that I actually use myself. You can turn off the halo column, which I personally like more, but you can also keep it on. But with the halo column off, you won't have that little bar in the middle of your screen, which will help you a little bit more as well, of course. You can do a little bit of tweaking, but I found that these settings are very enjoyable for both cockpit cam as well as the T-cam on every single car. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are the best settings on F122. If you have any questions, make sure you ask them during my live shows on Twitch, and make sure you leave that subscription as well if you enjoyed today's video. Now, we have plenty more F122 content coming, but for now, see you later, bye-bye.